Morning flooded the kitchen like it owned the place. Pale light on marble, quiet hum from the fridge, my hands wrapped around a mug I didn't taste. This house was curated to look like serenity. Lately it felt like a stage built for someone else's lines. Evan swept in on cue, fresh shave, gym glow, the smile he used for clients and anniversaries. He set a glossy brochure on the island. A coastal wellness retreat. 8 nights. Yoga at sunrise. Sound baths at twilight. He added a first-class ticket like a bow on a lie. He said I needed a serious break, that I'd been tight, on edge, not myself. I let the words wash past me. 2 weeks earlier, his tablet had chimed on the sofa while he showered. A message thread. Brielle's name, soft and bright on the screen. He promised to send Lena away for 8 nights so they could have the house to themselves. He used my name like a shipping label. The rest of the thread smelled like champagne and fresh paint. So I studied the brochure with an interested smile and traced the embossed waves with my thumb. I asked about massages, organic meals, private coaches, gentle questions to feed his script. He looked relieved, even proud, telling me I deserved this. I nodded and watched his pupils widen the way they do when he thinks he's winning. Isn't it strange how love and arrogance can share the same face? When he hugged me, I felt how practiced it was. The temple kiss, the deep breath like he was smelling us. My heart didn't answer. It just took notes. He pointed to the departure time, the car service he'd arranged, the playlist he'd made for the flight. He was generous when generosity served a plan. I rinsed my empty mug after he left for the office. The sink water ran cold, then warm, then hot enough to sting. I let it. The house was quiet except for the timber creak near the hallway and a far gull crying over the marsh. I stared at my reflection in the dark stove glass. I looked like a wife who was cared for. I looked like a woman who was done. I packed that afternoon with the windows open to salt air and a distant lawnmower. No beach dresses. No spa sandals. I folded dark jeans, a simple black sweater, and running shoes that could move fast and carry weight. A compact charger. A second phone. Plain makeup. No perfume, nothing memorable. My passport went in the side pocket, not because of the trip, but because I was done trusting outcomes to other people. In the closet, I rested a hand on the cuff of his tux. It hung there, cocky and capable, smelling faintly of cedar blocks and old whiskey. I thought about the house we built like a branded story. Colorways and texture boards. Dinner parties repeating the same compliments. He liked it best when I played head of narrative, smoothing the plot. I had trained the world to believe in us. Proof, I realized, is just story with receipts. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the Notes app. A simple checklist appeared, lines stacking like bones, voice recorder. Entry key. Cloud backup. Nora. I typed her name, then stopped. I had not told her yet. The truth had been too sharp to say out loud. Would you have called, or would you have waited, letting the shape of it harden inside you? Outside, a boat engine coughed and faded. I listened to my breath count itself down. 8 nights. He gave me a timeline. He gave me structure. He handed me the parameters of his secret and taught me the dimensions of my exit. At dinner, he was sweetness and stories, memories retold like dessert recipes. He brushed my hand and asked if I was excited. I said I was grateful. The word tasted like metal. He didn't notice. He was already living in tomorrow. I set my suitcase by the door before bed. He slid an arm around my waist in the dark and drifted off with the satisfied weight of a man who believes the house will bend around his choices. I watched the ceiling fan turn, carving the room into quiet pieces. Somewhere between 2 and 3 a.m., I smiled into the pillow. Not a happy smile, something smaller, cleaner. In the morning, he would send me to the airport with a curated kiss and a timeline he thought he controlled. I would leave, yes. Just not the way he imagined. The car door thumped shut, and his playlist cued something from our first year. Strings, soft vocals, the kind of memory that forgives everything. Evan tapped the steering wheel, humming like the world still adored us. He squeezed my hand at a red light and told me he couldn't wait to see the glow on my face when I got back. I watched the marsh slide by in flashes of silver water and pale reeds. He talked about breath work and silent breakfasts and how I should really unplug. I nodded at the windshield and counted the seconds between mile markers. He performed tenderness like a man who knew his audience. He forgot I had stopped clapping. At the terminal curb, he parked where the sign says no standing. He didn't care. He hugged me longer than usual. A full body press, a forehead kiss, a whispered, "Call me when you land." I let my arms rest around his neck and held just enough to make the goodbye feel expensive. He pulled my suitcase out and brushed a speck of lint from my sweater. He was careful with the details when they protected the scene. He walked me to the sliding doors and pointed toward the check-in counters. Then he turned and headed inside himself, an efficient stride, phone already in his hand. He didn't look back. I memorized that too. How easy it was. Inside, the air smelled like coffee, rubber soles, and recycled hope. Announcements rose and fell like tides. I stood near the kiosks for 3 breaths, then pivoted. Out through the same doors. Left toward the rideshare lane. The humid edge of Charleston morning wrapped around me like a reminder. You still live here. I ordered a car and pulled my sunglasses low. My suitcase wheels clicked over the sidewalk seam, a neat little metronome for leaving one life and walking into another. Isn't it strange how endings always borrow the sound of beginnings? The driver pulled up in a white crossover with a cracked pineapple air freshener. He asked if my flight was delayed. I told him I had a change of plan. He laughed and said it happens all the time. I smiled and clipped my seatbelt. The lie was over. The acting could end for me too. As we eased into traffic, I called Nora. She picked up on the first ring with her work voice, calm, caffeinated, ready. I told her Evan had left the airport and that I was headed back to Seabrook Cove. She didn't waste words. She said, "Good. Text me when you're close." There was a second of silence, like a held breath, then she added, "We'll do this clean." I ended the call and stared at the ticket still tucked in my bag. First class. Seat 2A. A window view of a future I would never board. I slid the ticket into the outer pocket next to my passport. Not as a keepsake, more like a label on the box where I'd store this version of myself. The highway opened, and the car gathered speed. Sun struck the water between bridges, and gulls rode the crosswind with ugly grace. My pulse slowed to a workable rhythm. I thought about the brochure on our island, the embossed waves, the way his pupils widened when he believed me. I had given him nothing but a mirror. My phone buzzed. A text from Evan. Security line is wild. You through yet? I typed back, just got here. True, in a way. I was arriving, just not where he thought. We crossed onto the causeway, and the air shifted to salt and sunlight. My neighborhood sat ahead like a magazine spread, all white railings and blue shadows. When the car turned off the main road, the tires hissed over oyster shells and old leaves. I could feel him somewhere on the other side of all this, checking his watch, calculating, arranging the next move in a game he thought he owned. I checked the time and pictured the timing like a clean diagram. 15 minutes for him to leave the airport, 30 to collect confidence and Brielle, 20 to unlock my door with a key I paid for. If I moved with the tide, I'd be there first. Or just after. Either way, the story would stop pretending to be kind. The driver asked if I wanted music. I told him silence was perfect. He nodded and let the hush fill the car. My breath found a steady count. My hands were steady too. Would you have done the same, turned around at the door of your escape and walked straight back into the fire? We rolled past the marina and the park where children laughed like they were paid for joy. The crossover took the last curve, and the houses rose out of the morning like polite witnesses. I watched our street appear between live oaks and careful hedges. The map on the dashboard blinked, then settled on my pin. When the driver slowed for the final turn, I saw the shine of our cul-de-sac through a scrim of Spanish moss. The car coasted. My heartbeat counted down. Somewhere, a lawn sprinkler ticked like a metronome for the inevitable. I lifted my phone, opened a blank note, and typed 2 words I was finally ready to say out loud: going home. The car nose pointed in. I didn't blink. Tires whispered over palmetto shade, and the AC muttered at my cheek. My pulse kept bad time with the turn signal. Nora was in my ear, calm, clipped, the way she gets when the answer is procedure, not comfort. She gave me rules like a surgeon laying out instruments. Enter quiet. Phone recording before the door opens. Photos first, wide shots, then details. No yelling, no accusations, no contact. Do not touch them, do not let them touch you. If voices rise, step back and leave. She said I should text her when I'm out, not when I'm brave. I repeated each step in my head until the rhythm steadied my hands. Voice memo app, check. Cloud backup, on. Second phone synced, yes. Key fob, front door, side door, garage. My breath softened into something usable. Evidence doesn't need volume. It needs light. Nora added the courtroom logic beneath the rules. Let the record show the house was quiet when you arrived. Let the images say what your mouth wants to scream. Don't hand them a scene their lawyer can twist into mutual breakdown. She reminded me how fast rage becomes someone else's alibi. I watched the river flash between live oaks and rooftops, glittering and indifferent. There is a part of the mind that begs to burn everything down, just for the sound. Mine was loud, but leashed. Would proof still feel like justice if I didn't get to watch it land? I told her the truth I hadn't said out loud. I wanted to see his face. Not to hurt him, just to watch the mask release, to witness the moment the story stopped obeying him. The lines scraped my throat on the way out. Nora didn't scold. She listened. Then she gave me an alternative that tasted like steel. If you step into the room, step in as a camera, not a wife. Minimal speech, only logistical words. Don't touch me. I'm leaving. Copies are secure. Nothing more. She called it containment. I tried those phrases on in a whisper, like shoes. They fit better than I expected. Containment. Clean lines. The opposite of the years I had spent smoothing his edges and widening doorways for his charm. There's a power in refusing to narrate for someone else. The driver asked if the temperature was okay. I said perfect and adjusted the vent to my wrist. My skin felt cold and honest. I typed a text to Evan, boarding soon, will call before takeoff, and hit send. He answered with a heart emoji and a plane. I looked at the icons and saw receipts. Nora moved on to small, important things. Keep your shoulders square. Stand by an exit. Do not set your bag down where it can be grabbed. If he blocks your path, turn your body sideways and pass without contact. If you feel your voice start to shake, let it. Judges respect control more than volume. Control is often quiet. I asked what to do if Brielle cried. Nora said tears are not my assignment. My assignment is a chain of custody the judge will respect. She said my calm would be louder than any apology he tried on. A neighborhood sign appeared, a painted heron in blue water. Harbor Point. The car slowed, blinked, and turned. Lawns clipped to ruler lines eased past. I flipped the recorder open, watched the red line crawl, then tucked the phone into my sweater pocket. The small weight over my ribs felt like a promise. We passed the park where kids shrieked into sprinklers. A dog barked twice at nothing important. The ordinary day offended me for one beat, and then it soothed me. The world didn't change just because I had decided to stop lying. Nora asked me to repeat the exit plan. I did. Record, document, leave. Call you from the corner. She made me say the last part twice, like vows. Then she reminded me of the one thing she cannot litigate, my need to watch him know. She told me to choose that carefully because closure charges interest. I said I understood. I did. Understanding and appetite are not the same species. We hit the last straightaway before my street. The asphalt shone like a fresh decision. I slid my sunglasses higher, felt the bridge of my nose tighten, and measured the distance in heartbeats. I could see my house in my mind, white railings, deep porch, the brass lantern I'd chosen on a rainy Tuesday. I could also see the version of it I needed now, doorway, threshold, sight lines, exits. A home reduced to an outline for proof. Nora's voice softened on the edge of the plan. She said she would stay on the line until I asked her not to. She said she trusted me to pick the version of strength that would hold. The trust slid into my chest and settled there, heavier than fear. The driver took the penultimate turn. Spanish moss drew long gray commas across the morning. I checked the time and felt the math click into place. Enough minutes for his grin to spread, for laughter to fill rooms I painted, for glasses to clink on a table I oiled by hand. The thought didn't crack me. It sharpened me. I told Nora I was close. She said, then breathe. Remember the rules. And when you're clear, call. I ended the call and let silence take the passenger seat. The car rolled toward the final corner. I placed my hand over the recorder, felt the hum of the engine and the tiny digital heartbeat under my palm. Please drop me before the bend, I told the driver. He nodded, eased the car to the curb, and put it in park. I stepped out, closed the door without sound, and stood one house away from mine, just around the corner, where the scene began without me. I could smell lemons and low tide. I could hear nothing yet. I lifted my chin and started walking. The corner swallowed me, and my street unfolded in clean lines. Sun on railings. Shade moving slow under the oaks. I counted 4 mailboxes, then my porch came into view, white columns, brass lantern, the doormat I'd shaken yesterday like a woman who planned to leave. 2 cars sat in my driveway like signatures. Evan's black SUV, confident as ever. Beside it, a small teal hatchback I knew from Brielle's feed, cute, eager, unmistakable. The pairing looked like a confession written in driveway script. I let the image burn into me until the anger cooled to shape. Would you have paused there, or walked straight into your proof? I checked the sidewalk, no neighbors, just a sprinkler ticking time to itself. I adjusted my grip on the suitcase handle and let the wheels whisper over concrete. My keyring felt heavier than usual. Ownership tends to weigh what it's worth. At the steps, I stopped and breathed through Nora's rules. Recorder first. Cloud on. No verbal contact unless necessary. I tucked my hair behind one ear, opened the voice memo app, and named the file like a label on a box I'd never unpack again. Seabrook, entry day 1. The red line blinked alive. I slid the phone into my coat pocket, mic up, screen dark. The brass lock turned smooth. I stepped into cool air scented like lemons and quiet money. A small mechanical click from the thermostat, the distant hush of the dishwasher cycling, the soft sleep of a house that thinks it knows you. My pulse steadied into something practical. I closed the door without a sound and stood on the runner, letting my eyes adjust. Sun fell through the transoms in pale rectangles. The entry table held a bowl with 2 keys I didn't recognize, teal fobs, probably hers. Tiny, cheerful trespasses. On the console lay a bottle of sparkling water beating on a coaster I bought in Savannah. The wet ring on the marble looked like a watermark on a document. From deeper in the house, music drifted forward, something light with a low bass, barely pretending to be background. Then a laugh, high, loose, unafraid. Another laugh, his rounder, claiming space it didn't own. Glass clink. Footsteps thumped down onto the living room rug I'd chosen for durability with grace. The vocabulary mocked me in my own voice. I moved along the wall, shoulders square, counting sight lines. Wide shot first, hallway, console, open concepts throat. I lifted my second phone, camera ready, but kept it low. Evidence doesn't need haste. It needs angles. The house sounded different with them in it. Not loud or lighter, like chairs shrugging off manners. I realized I had spent years listening for signs of us and calling them home. Now the same signs were just data points. It felt cleaner than I expected. Maybe grief had taken what it wanted already. Maybe clarity had better manners. I set my suitcase gently beside the dining bench and took the first wide photo, entry to living room, the line of sight to the sectional, the throw blanket I folded this morning now flung over the arm like a flag. Flash off. Natural light caught everything in honest color. The remote sat on the coffee table beside 2 glasses. One lipstick mark in coral. She had chosen a younger shade. The image went crisp on the screen. I watched it upload to the cloud and felt a calm, mean peace. A giggle carried her voice this time, threaded with a question I couldn't catch. His answer came with that warm arrogance people mistake for charm. Their words blurred, but the tone was fluent. Entitlement, ease, the kind of privacy people practice when they believe the house loves them back. I stayed against the wall and pressed the record icon again, confirming the file was still taking everything. The tiny digital heartbeat pulsed against my ribs. I angled the phone so the mic could drink the room. My breath slowed into a measured metronome. The AC vent hummed a clean white noise I could hide inside. I took detail shots. The shoes by the bar cart, his loafers, her sandals with gold straps. A denim jacket thrown over the back of a counter stool. A tote bag slouched open, revealing a tape measure, a notebook, and a packet of paint swatches with her initials stickered on top. She brought tools to my kitchen. The audacity made something in my chest unclench. Reality loves blunt edges. The laughter swelled. Something clinked, then a light thud like a bottle set down too quickly. I leaned to catch a sliver of view, just enough to see the edge of the sectional and the spill of sun across the rug. I didn't step farther. My job here was record, not perform. I lifted the camera again for a medium shot, kitchen island to living room threshold. The composition looked like a magazine spread with a stain you can't unsee. The shutter clicked without flash. Upload. Confirm. Done. My mind tried to make a different choice, to walk in, to speak, to throw language at the shape of what I'd already captured. I let the urge roll through and out. Nora was right. Rage is an alibi you hand the enemy. I wasn't here to audition for a judge. I was here to feed one. From the living room, his voice surfaced, words now clear, as if the house tilted them toward me. He said something about 8 nights. He sounded pleased with his math. Her laugh followed, bells and breath. They were so certain of their stage they forgot the props were mine. I checked the recorder again, levels strong, timestamp marching. I loosened my jaw and realized my hands had stopped shaking. That surprised me. Maybe this is what closure feels like before it gets a costume. A stray beam of sun hit the framed photo on the hallway wall, Evan and me, oysters and smiles, sleeves rolled, summer light. I remembered the grit of shell under my thumb, the sweet cold salt, the way he had watched the table watch him. The picture felt like a brochure now, prettied truth, useful only until you read the fine print. My foot slid forward on the runner. One more step, and I'd be visible. I could choose not to be. I could reverse, retreat, leave with a file full of voices and a phone full of proofs. I could also end the theater now and let them see the light. A breeze shivered the drapes in the dining room, and the lemon scent lifted like a cue. Somewhere outside, a gull cut the air with a thin metal cry. The scene waited. I placed my palm flat on the wall to feel the vibration of the house, faint, living mine. The recorder caught a new sound, his deeper laugh, closer now, followed by the soft smack of a kiss that didn't belong to me. The red line on my screen crawled forward. I took one breath, then another, and let their voices fill the file until it was undeniable. Their laughter thinned, then gathered like wind under a door. I stayed still, listening. The recorder warmed my ribcage through the fabric. A glass clinked. I settled. His voice arrived first, easy, satisfied, a man narrating his own cleverness. He told her I'd eaten up the retreat. He said the house was ours 8 nights, no interruptions, a private season inside someone else's vows. He sounded pleased with his logistics. Pride has a sound when it leaks. Brielle's reply floated up like a smile you can hear. She teased him about sending me away. She wondered aloud if I ever suspected. He answered with that soft confidence I once helped build, the kind that slides past questions and calls it charm. Their words didn't cut, not exactly. They arranged the scene in bright, awful order. I pressed my shoulders to the wall and let my pulse step down. The lemon scent lifted when the AC kicked on. Somewhere outside, a dog barked twice and gave up. Inside, my name became an object moved around a map. I remembered how I had taught rooms to like him. The thought cooled whatever was left of the ache. He started complaining about recent tension, about me being on edge, harder to manage. He said I needed structure. He had provided it. The irony made me smile without humor. He had handed me a calendar for his ruin. Another clink. Her laugh again, closer, skin on upholstery, the softened squeak of our sectional shrugging under borrowed intimacy. I pictured the room without looking, a throw blanket unfurled, his shirt half buttoned on her, the remote exiled to the table's edge. The image didn't stab. It aligned. Would you have stepped in then, or collected more and left the theater intact? I checked the red line steady. Timestamps marched like proof with shoes on. I whispered the containment phrases under my breath, felt them settle. Don't touch me. I'm leaving. Copies are secure. They fit my mouth like braced metal. He thanked her for putting up with the secrecy. He promised it would all be easier soon. I heard Brielle ask how, her voice tilting toward future. He answered with a plan that treated my name like paperwork. That was the moment the room flipped for me, not grief, not rage, just clarity putting on boots. I lifted the phone, framed a final medium shot down the throat of the room, and let the shutter whisper. Upload. Confirm. The image landed in the cloud like a sealed envelope. The ache inside me completed its last job and clocked out. I straightened my spine and felt the hinge of decision click. The sound was small, internal, metal finding home. Breath in, breath out, shoulders square to the doorway. I adjusted my grip, turned the camera to photo, and dimmed the screen. He laughed again, closer now, facing the hallway. Her bracelet chimed against glass. The house waited, bright and complicit. I thought about the years I had spent smoothing edges. I thought about silence as a tool, not a wound. My shoes made no sound on the runner. I stepped forward until the shadow broke across my shoes, then stopped. The first sliver of their afternoon slid into view, sun on fabric, the curve of his knee, her bare calf draped careless and certain. The recorder caught a small intake of my breath and steadied. I didn't clear my throat. I didn't announce myself. I let the scene discover me like a truth that refuses to stay in the dark. My hand rose, the camera balanced, my face quiet. The house exhaled around us. I took the last half step and crossed the threshold into their light. Flash. A white slice of truth cut the room. Evan's smile died mid-breath. Brielle froze, then grabbed for the shirt she'd been wearing like a borrowed idea. The camera chirped again. Another flash printed their bodies in hard daylight, his hand on her thigh, her knee tucked into the cushions I paid for. He barked first, loud enough to rattle glass. What are you doing? The tone tried to make me small. The flash answered for me. The shutter snapped, precise, almost kind. Would you have kept the flash on, or spared them the mercy of shadow? Brielle shrieked my name as if it could protect her. Buttons slid under her fingers, refused to catch. She tugged the hem down and glared with more heat than courage. Evan moved faster off the couch, palms up, then forward like a man negotiating with a wild animal he had fed for years. Another photo. The light carved sweat along his hairline. His mouth worked through 3 expressions and landed on indignation, the old standby. He told me to stop. He told me we could talk. He reached for the phone. I stepped back, angled my body, and let my voice arrive the way Nora taught me. Don't touch me. For words, level, clean. The room heard the new rules before he did. The flash popped again, catching Brielle's face in a bright, graceless cringe. She demanded I delete everything. She said I was humiliating myself. Her voice wobbled on the word self. I took a close shot of the glasses on the table, lipstick and coral, condensation on crystal, fingerprints like careless signatures. Evidence loves texture. Evan tried a softer register. He said we should breathe. He said he was worried about me. The old choreography reached for my spine. It found nothing. I kept the camera steady and clipped the last piece of theater from the script. The images are synced to the cloud, I said. Copies are secure. He stopped moving. It was small, half a step, a tiny stall in the air around him, but the whole balance shifted and settled somewhere new. Fear has a weight truth recognizes. Brielle's eyes flicked to the ceiling as if the cloud were a visible, cruel sky. She asked if I was serious. I took a wide shot of the two of them in the frame, his body angled toward me, hers curled in, the shirt hanging open at the wrist where a button had surrendered. Upload. Confirm. The red progress bar gave me a pulse I trusted more than my own. He tried anger again because it used to work. He accused me of invading privacy. He called me vindictive. I let the words fall between us and pick their own sides. The recorder in my pocket gathered each syllable like it was coin. Step back, I told him. Now. My voice was low enough to be mistaken for mercy. He heard the metal under it and flattened his palms. He started bargaining with empty hands. He said we could fix this quietly. He said no one needed to know. That's not true, I said, and it felt like opening a window after years of stale air. He lunged then, impulse, not plan, and I moved the way Nora mapped it, sideways, clean, out of reach. Don't, I said. Not shouted. Not pleaded. Just closed. His momentum died against the record of who he was in that moment. The house seemed to pull away from him an inch. Brielle recovered first, which surprised me. She went for sour dignity. She claimed she didn't know about our arrangements. She asked me not to use the photos. Her eyes were glassy, but her chin was set like someone auditioning for the brave role. I took a photo of her tote bag on my bar stool, tape measure, paint swatches, a notebook with a gold B. She had brought tools to reimagine rooms I already finished. Please, Evan said then. Not a command, not a performance. A raw, graceless word. It hung there between the ice and the lemon scent and the distant drone of the AC. It would have broken me once. Now it just labeled the scene. My heartbeat slowed without asking permission. I felt ground under my shoes again. The camera lowered by a fraction. My breath came back wearing steel. Listen carefully, I said, because I needed containers, not poetry. Everything is documented. Everything is backed up. If you touch me or my phone, the set goes public. He swallowed. The line down his throat jumped, and the room adjusted to a new gravity. I watched him understand he wasn't negotiating with the wife he'd scheduled. He was standing in front of the owner of the narrative and the deed. He tried a last-angle love, history, softer memories. He held out the architecture of us like it could shade him from consequence. I let the memories pass through me like light through a screen. They left less than I expected. I'm calm, I said, because he needed the label. And I'm leaving in 2 minutes. That caught him. His eyes flicked to the door, then back to my face, like he understood the part where my leaving meant the story would travel without him. Brielle whispered that this didn't have to be ugly. I almost laughed. Ugliness had been eating at the baseboards for months. I was just turning on the lights. I took one last photograph, room wide, sun hard, both of them caught in the honest geometry of consequence. The phone pinged when the upload finished. Somewhere in the quiet cloud above us, the proof knitted itself into permanence. I slid the camera into my pocket next to the recorder. The tiny devices beat like small, obedient hearts. I could feel Nora's instructions threaded through my muscles, studying the space between impulse and action. Evan asked, finally, what I wanted. I checked the time, then looked at him with a stillness I'd earned. To begin, I said. And then I reached for the part of our life he had always treated like decoration and prepared to read it aloud. I took the blue folder from my bag and set it on the island. Paper made a soft, final sound. Evan stared at it like a snake he once owned. Brielle hugged his shirt closed and went quiet, eyes flicking from my face to the pages. I didn't raise my voice. I raised the record. The agreement sat there in simple type, dates, signatures, notarized seals. I touched the first tab and read the clause that names the Seabrook Cove house as separate property, funded from my grandmother's estate. I pointed to the transfer receipt, the trust letter, the closing document with my name alone. He tried a laugh that couldn't lift off. He said the house was ours in spirit. I let the words drift to the recorder and die where they landed. Spirit does not carry a deed. Next tab, Heartstone Properties. I reminded him how his seed money wasn't a seed, it was a wire from my account on day one. I slid forward the operating agreement he joked about, the cap table we signed, the clause that makes majority belong to the source, not the storyteller. His jaw tightened. Numbers do not blush when you stare at them. I turned to the page he never believed would matter. Infidelity provision. Plain language, no poetry. Upon proof, control of joint assets shifts to me for stabilization and division. The word proof looked small and sharp, like a clean blade. I tilted my pocket toward them so the recorder could drink their breathing. Evan ran through the old cycle, confusion, apology, blame. He said I had engineered this. He said I'd been distant, that he felt abandoned, that Brielle was a mistake I was overstating. Each excuse arrived with less color than the last. Brielle spoke once, a small plea, saying she didn't know the details and was sorry if she crossed a line. If I kept my hands flat on the marble. I told him the messages were saved, the photos backed up, the audio active. I told him I was leaving now and he would leave too today. Not forever in this sentence, just today. It was enough. He tried anger again, louder, asking what kind of woman does this to her husband. The kind who reads her own contract, I thought, and doesn't need a witness to believe it. Stop, I said, and the word landed heavier than his volume. I reached to the entry table and lifted the 2 teal key fobs from the bowl. They were lighter than they had any right to be. I slipped them into my pocket and felt the house settle an inch closer to me. He shifted to promises. He could change. He could fix the company. He could go to therapy, sell the cars, start over. He stacked futures on the counter like coasters. I let the stack wobble and slide into silence. Would you have argued with a drowning man, or let the water tell him the truth? I checked the time and gave them numbers instead of speeches. 25 minutes to pack personal items and leave the property. Clothing only, no files, no devices, nothing that plugs in. If he stayed past the deadline, I would call Nora and then the police for trespass. The word sounded clinical in that pretty kitchen. It fit. Brielle started to cry, quiet and human. She asked if I would please not use the photos. Her voice aimed for dignity and landed on 29. I said nothing. Some requests do not have answers. Evan called me cruel. Then he called me by the nickname he saved for anniversaries. I watched it fail. The sound fell between us with no purchase. He understood then, finally, that the furniture of our marriage no longer held weight. I told him I would wait on the corner. I told him the garage code would change at the top of the hour. I told him the locksmith was already scheduled for noon. None of that was drama. It was logistics, the language he respected when it served him. He asked where he was supposed to go. I met his eyes and felt nothing need to rise. Not my assignment, I said. The recorder caught the quiet afterward, the way cold air fills a room when the door opens. I picked up my bag and wheeled the suitcase to the door. The lemon scent followed like a polite ghost. At the threshold, I paused, not to savor anything, but to let the scene imprint clean. He stood by the sectional, shoulders half squared, half slumped. Brielle clutched the shirt and watched me like a student who disliked the exam. I'll be back in 25 minutes, I said, calm as a calendar. Be gone. I stepped onto the porch and closed the door with the same care I used when I believed in us. Sun hit my face. The street looked unchanged, oaks, railings, a sprinkler ticking without concern. I walked to the corner and set my bag down in the shade. My phone buzzed, then stilled. I didn't check it. I watched the minute hand climb, counting the distance between what I had tolerated and what I would allow. Somewhere inside my house, drawers opened, hangers scraped, feet hurried over what I oiled by hand. 25 minutes can feel like an hour or like a verdict waiting to be read. I stood there, breathing the marsh air, and let the clock make me powerful. Rain stitched at Nora's windows the first night I stayed there. Her guest room smelled like clean cotton and coffee. I slept without acting for the first time in months, one hand on my phone, the other on nothing at all. By morning, my screen was a gallery of whiplash. Evan had sent apologies that read like sales copy. Then threats about fighting for the company. Then voice notes that almost cried, then didn't. I scrolled until the words blurred and set his thread to mute. Would you have listened for weakness or kept your peace safe? Nora didn't ask for drama. She asked for order. She built a battlefield out of paper and timestamps. On her dining table, a neat line of manila folders with stick-on tabs. Photos. Audio. Messages. The signed agreement. Funding documents. Bank letters proving my inheritance, purchased the house, and seeded Hearthstone. She handled each piece like a tool, not a souvenir. She set up a whiteboard calendar with real days and courtroom words written in dry erase blue. Petition. Exclusive occupancy. Freeze joint accounts. Serve notice. She explained the sequence the way a pilot explains turbulence, calm, factual, boring on purpose. I breathed easier because boring meant we were pointed somewhere. On day 2, Evan tried a new tone coaching. He said we could reframe this. He said I was overreacting. He sent a photo of the sectional, empty, the throw blanket folded like an apology. The emptiness looked staged. I closed the image and returned to Nora's table, where emptiness doesn't get a say. On day 3, a bank alert pinged my phone. Unusual activity on a joint account we barely used. A big transfer out, then another attempt. I handed the phone to Nora and watched the lines around her mouth settle into action. She printed 2 forms without looking at the keys. She asked me to sign where the tabs stuck up like small flags. Emergency motion to freeze. Authorization to notify institutions. My signature went down clean. The pen felt heavier than a camera, lighter than a door. We scanned the packet and sent it to the cloud folder that held my new life. The same cloud that now held their faces. The symmetry comforted me more than it should have. Evan's messages changed with the weather. He promised to be fair if I came home. He threatened to take Hearthstone back if I didn't. He wrote paragraphs about history, memories, trips, plans. He sent nothing about terms. I answered only once, please direct all communication to council. The words fit my mouth like a new key. On the 5th morning, Nora arrived at the table with a thick folder and the small, satisfied smile she saves for clean wins. Inside, the divorce petition, the request for exclusive occupancy of the Seabrook Cove house, and the motion to freeze joint accounts until division. She walked me through each page, what it said, what it implied, what it asked the court to do. No Latin. No theater. Just lines and consequences. She pointed to the signatures, to the exhibits, to the little numbered tabs that made our chaos legible. Exhibit A, the marital agreement. Exhibit B, funding records. Exhibit C, the message thread with "Send Lena away." Exhibit D, the photo set and audio log. She had indexed my heartbreak into something a judge could enforce. We took a break only to breathe. She poured tea, strong and dark. Rain softened to a mist outside, turning the street into a watercolor. My phone vibrated against the coaster. Evan again. We can fix this. Don't do anything rash. Rash was a funny word for paperwork. That afternoon, we filed electronically with Charleston County Family Court. Nora logged in, attached exhibits, typed case captions without pausing. I watched the progress bar crawl like a tide line across the screen. When the portal pinged confirmation, a case number appeared in blue. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like gravity choosing a direction. I stared at the number until it meant what it needed to mean. This story no longer belonged to my living room. It belonged to record. The system stamped the time down to the minute. Every second after that would be counted, not remembered. We emailed the filings to Greg Saunders, the trial lawyer Evan liked for his volume. Nora's message was 2 sentences long and dry. Attached, filed, served. She didn't write a single extra word. She didn't need to. A bank compliance officer emailed back within an hour, polite and efficient. The freeze went into effect pending hearing. A small knot in my chest released that I hadn't known was there. Money loves to run. This time, it would stand still and wait its turn. At dusk, Nora and I walked to a corner cafe because movement keeps the body useful. We split a sandwich and didn't talk much. She asked how I was sleeping. I told her better, which was true enough. She said the court would likely set a quick hearing on occupancy. She said the judge would care about contracts and clean chains of proof. She didn't say hope. She never does. That's why I trust her. Back at the townhouse, I opened my messages and scrolled through the wreckage without touching it. One voice note sat unread, time-stamped 20 minutes after the filing. I listened once, not twice. Evan's voice swung from shame to anger and back again, then broke on the word company. He promised to fight. He promised to love me. He promised outcomes he couldn't fund. I deleted the note and placed the phone face down. The guest room waited in soft light. I packed my suitcase back into the closet because I wouldn't need it for a while. The house in Seabrook Cove was still mine, but the court would bless the boundary, not my memory. That mattered more than pride. Before sleep, I stood by the window and watched rain lift off the street like steam. I thought about the island kitchen, the brass lantern, the lemon air. I pictured unlocking that door again, not to beg for peace, but to enforce it. My phone chimed once more. An email from the court, hearing scheduled soon. The subject line had a date and a time that fit like a verdict waiting for a voice. I turned off the lamp and lay down, palms open against the sheet, the quiet loud enough to hold me. The case number hovered behind my eyes like a street address for the truth. Tomorrow, we would walk into a bright, quiet courtroom. And the story would learn how to stand up in front of a judge. Family court felt like a bright library that didn't trust feelings. Light on varnished benches. AC steady as a metronome. Paper sounds, shoe squeaks, the soft cough of justice clearing its throat. I sat beside Nora and folded my hands, knuckles pale and calm. Evan looked smaller under fluorescent truth. The tan had drained. The suit fit but didn't help. Greg Saunders leaned toward the aisle like a man who believed projection could out paper. Across the rail, Judge Elaine McCarthy adjusted her glasses and skimmed our file. Her expression said, "This is a contract, not a poem." We rose. Names, case number, the ritual that makes strangers responsible for your life. Greg opened with heat. He tried to turn the room into theater, words like manipulation, ambush, orchestrated spectacle. He painted the affair as a symptom, not a choice, and framed me as an ice queen with a camera. The judge let him talk until he repeated himself. Then she held up one finger without looking up. The room cooled by 2 degrees. She asked for the document that would matter first. Nora slid the marital agreement forward, tabbed, indexed, signed. The notary seal flashed like a small sun. Nora did not perform. She arranged. She reminded the court that the Seabrook Cove house was purchased with my inheritance, documented and titled in my name. She pointed to closing statements, the trust letter, the wire receipt. No adjectives, just arithmetic. She moved to Hearthstone, the initial capital infusion from my account, the operating agreement giving control to the majority funder. She placed the cap table where the judge's pen rested as if the numbers were tired and wanted to sit. Greg objected to relevance. The judge didn't look up. "Overruled," she said, almost kindly. Facts were arriving on time. Then Nora pressed the button that mattered. Infidelity clause, plain language, triggered by proof. She described the chain, messages recovered from Evan's tablet, the audio recorded in my lawful home, the time-stamped photos auto-synced to cloud with metadata intact. She offered exhibits by letter, not flourish. The bailiff, silent witness, carried each to the bench. Greg tried again, louder. He accused me of staging my return. He called it entrapment in everything but the legal word. The judge asked him which clause in our contract excused an affair arranged in my house while I was sent away. He paged, stalled, smiled, blustered. The smile had nowhere to go. Nora unspooled the message thread where Evan promised to send Lena away for 8 nights. She read it like weather, not scandal. Across from me, Evan flinched as if the text had learned to walk. The judge's eyes lifted for the first time, took in his face, then returned to the page. She wrote a note with a blue pen that did not hurry. "Would you have looked at him then, or kept your eyes on the horizon you had already chosen?" I watched the clock instead. Justice moves slow until it moves all at once. Nora asked permission to play a brief excerpt of the audio. Laughter, glasses clinking, my name folded into logistics. The judge listened with the same attention she would give a spreadsheet. She nodded once, the smallest gavel in the room. Greg pivoted history, community standing, jobs at Hearthstone, the economy, the marriage's spirit. He raised his voice on spirit like volume could make it negotiable. Judge McCarthy leaned back and asked if he had any document that placed spirit on the deed. The gallery breathed out a laugh it didn't mean to. Greg swallowed his next adjective. Findings came like steps on a clean staircase. The court recognized the marital agreement as valid and enforceable. The house remained my separate property. Exclusive occupancy granted, effective immediately. All keys, fobs, and codes to be surrendered by 5 p.m. today. A locksmith order signed on the spot, just in case generosity failed. On Hearthstone, the judge followed the math. Majority ownership confirmed to the majority funder. Interim control awarded to me pending formal division. A forensic accountant would finalize allocations, but direction was set. Greg tried to speak. The judge raised the same single finger. He sat. Joint liquid assets? Frozen per our motion, then divided under the infidelity clause. The judge called the clause unambiguous and self-executing upon proof. She said the proof had a timeliness and quality that satisfied the court. In the row behind us, someone's pen clicked once and stopped, as if even nervous habits obeyed the order. Greg rallied for one last pass of pity. Transitional hardship, he said. Evan would be left with nothing. The judge adjusted her glasses again and set a modest transition allowance with a timeline and an end. She looked at Evan for the first time and told him, in a voice that didn't need harshness, that consequences are not cruelty when they follow choices. Silence fell the way good endings do, soft, undeniable. The judge signed with the blue pen, handed pages to the clerk, and announced the next case with the same tone she'd used to order coffee. The world did not swell or sing. It simply moved forward. Evan didn't. He stayed seated after the judge left, hands clasped so tight his knuckles went colorless. Greg leaned in, whispering strategy like a man refurbishing a house that had already been condemned. Evan nodded at air. His eyes were glass without shine. We stood. Nora touched my elbow, not support, calibration. In the aisle, she murmured the checklist. Pick up certified copies, notify the bank, schedule locksmith, email HR at Heartstone about the control order. Procedure, not victory. That's how you keep wins from evaporating. In the corridor, sound came back. Phones buzzed. A copier hummed. I exhaled for what felt like the first time since the kitchen light hit that brochure. My body felt taller by half an inch, like someone had taken weight off my spine that I mistook for posture. Greg swept past, still talking. Evan followed, a step behind, the performative stride gone. He glanced at me once, not long enough to land. No speech, no scene. He just registered the distance, as if measuring a room he no longer rented. Outside, heat folded around us. Nora handed me the certified copies, the raised seals warm from the clerk's hand. Paperweight proof. She said we'd have the formal decree later, but for today, this was enough. Enough to change locks. Enough to brief the accountant. Enough to begin. I heard my phone ping. A bank notification, freeze confirmed, compliance note attached. Another ping, email from HR acknowledging the control order at Heartstone. The chain tightened in the best way, not choking, just holding. We reached the top of the courthouse steps. Across the street, a man sold boiled peanuts from a cart, steam lifting like small prayers that didn't need words. I realized I was hungry. That felt like a kind of peace. By evening, the locksmith would change the code. By night, the house would exhale in a new key. Within days, lines would move, signatures would travel, and titles would learn their proper names. What does justice sound like when it finally arrives? Not a gavel. Not a cheer. Just the quiet click of a door that locks on your terms. I looked down at the papers in my hand, then at the clean sky beyond the courthouse roofline. Tomorrow, I would start the part that came after winning. For months later, rain tapped the cafe window like it had finally run out of warnings. Nora slid a stamped copy of the final decree across the table. The raised seal pressed the paper like a thumbprint from reality. I traced the blue ink signature and felt something uncoil behind my ribs, slow and permanent. People imagine triumph is loud. This wasn't. It was a steady room, the smell of dark coffee, Nora's practical eyes, and my breathing arriving on time. She asked how the house felt now. I told her it smelled like paint and lemon oil and nothing else. No ghosts, no old decisions. Just square footage that answered to keys with my name on them. I reached into my tote and unfolded a creased boarding pass. One way to Lisbon. The paper had lived there for weeks, waiting for this stamp and this breath. I talked it out the way you talk out a recipe you already know, Portuguese classes in the mornings, a quiet sublet in Barro Alto with tile that glows pale blue, cooking lessons with someone's grandmother who doesn't bother measuring salt. Long hills for calves that want to learn patience. A market where fish stare back with bright, unapologetic eyes. Nora didn't ask why Lisbon. She asked where my mail would land, who'd watch the property, how the accounts would route. We built the scaffolding like always, dates, contacts, a simple rent plan for the Seabrook Cove house. I had a property manager now. The locksmith recommended him. I liked his paperwork more than his smile. That felt like growth. We ticked the rest of the boxes. International banking, health insurance abroad, temporary forwarding through the post office with a real end date, a calendar reminder to renew the trust documents next year. Nothing heroic, just the ordinary competence of a life not waiting for permission. Would you have felt sad or relieved, choosing a place where no one knew your old name? We finished our coffee without stretching the moment into meaning it didn't need. On the way out, rain softened to mist. Nora walked me to the curb and hugged me with her lawyer arms, brief, firm, the language we speak. She said to text when I landed, then added that she was proud of the way I had held the line. I said thank you. Pride isn't a word we use often. It fit. Back at Seabrook Cove, the house stood in its new colors, soft white walls, clean trim, a rug that didn't care about old stains. The sectional was gone. I sold it cheap to a college kid with a truck and zero history in his eyes. In the living room, I'd hung one framed print, a line drawing of the Atlantic traced like a single thought. The frame made the ocean behave. That made me smile. I opened windows to the marsh and let in the light. Cabinets clicked the way good sentences end. In the bedroom, fresh sheets held no memories. I packed one suitcase at the foot of the bed, dark jeans, the black sweater, shoes that climb stairs and don't apologize. A slim knife for the kitchen. A notebook with half its pages asking for a new alphabet. The blue folder with the decree went into the safe. Not to hide it, just to stop looking. I didn't need to reread victory. It had already done its job. Evening thinned the sky to pearl. I walked the rooms one last time, slow enough to take attendance. Brass lantern, accounted for. Porch railings, still sure of themselves. The lemon scent, gentler now, more like the idea of clean than a command to scrub. In the entryway, I set 2 keys on the table for the property manager, front door and back. The third key stayed on my ring because names matter. I stood at the kitchen island and wrote one short note with the fat black marker we keep for moving days. Welcome, I wrote. Please water the fiddle leaf. The plant had survived everything. It deserved care that had nothing to do with me. At the window, the marsh breathed like a creature that never needed our plot. A gull cut a line across the last light, and the tide flexed against the grasses with tiny, unhurried fists. I watched my reflection stand there, same face, same mouth, different weight. I said it out loud because truth likes a voice. You can go now. Night came quick and soft. I ate toast at the counter and didn't pretend it was dinner. I set an early alarm, not because I was afraid of missing the flight, but because first mornings deserve respect. In the quiet, the house hummed, agreeable and newly disinterested in drama. Sleep found me without layered thoughts. Morning found me before the alarm. I showered, dressed, folded the last shirt, and zipped the suitcase. The sound, clean, final, clicked like a small gate opening. At the door, I paused, not to look back, but to confirm alignment. Lights off, windows latched, envelope for the manager tucked where we agreed. I held the keys, felt their edges, and chose the ones I would take. I left the rest, neat and precise. Outside, the air tasted like salt and possibilities people write on postcards. The rideshare idled at the curb. I rolled my suitcase across the porch boards I had oiled myself, past the brass lantern that had watched too much and never told, down to the car that would take me to a plane I chose. I didn't text Evan. I didn't need to narrate this part for anyone else. My life stopped being a press release the day the judge used a blue pen. The driver asked where I was headed. I told him, and he whistled low like the word had good bones. The car pulled away from the only house that had ever learned my whole stride. The marsh slid past in slick green panels, then opened to bridges and light. I pressed my forehead to the glass and felt the world move. There was no surge of joy, no triumphant music, just a quiet awareness that I had become the person who picks a direction and walks it without flinching. At the terminal, I lifted my bag, checked the weight with my hand, and smiled at the math. Enough. I kept the house. I chose the horizon.